Welcome back to the World History, where today we journey into the blood-soaked soil of Gettysburg, the turning point that nearly shattered America in two. At first light, as the fog lifts over Pennsylvania hills, the haunting sight of the Gettysburg battlefield emerges. Smoke curls upward like ghosts from the ground as Union and Confederate forces prepare for a collision that would echo through the ages. From above, the chaos appears almost beautiful sunrise over a storm of cannon fire and clashing bayonets. But down below, the reality was pure horror. In the heart of the maelstrom, a Union soldier, face smeared with sweat and powder, lets out a battle cry. Behind him, a tattered American flag flutters, wounded but defiant. Every inch he gains is paid for in blood. On the opposite ridge, a Confederate general watches the carnage unfold. His jaw is tight, his eyes cold with calculation. He knows the cost, but he believes this is the moment to strike. With a shout, he unleashes wave after wave of gray-coated men into the fields now red with sacrifice. Then comes Pickett's charge, a desperate gamble. From a bird's-eye view, it looks like an unstoppable force. Thousands of Confederate soldiers advancing shoulder to shoulder into a wall of musket and cannon fire. But history would remember it as a slaughter. From Devil's Den, hidden among the rocks, a Union sharpshooter steadies his rifle. He scans the distant chaos for his target. One bullet here could alter the tide of battle. Every trigger pull is a decision between life and death. The fields become graveyards. Fallen soldiers lie in wheat-strewn silence as the sun sets behind their lifeless forms. Some are barely more than boys. The sound of muskets fades into the eerie quiet of aftermath. Amid the broken earth walks President Abraham Lincoln. His face carries the weight of the nation, his eyes heavy with grief. The battlefield around him is more than a scene of war. It's a reflection of a country torn at the seams. The air erupts again. An exploding cannonball lights the sky like lightning. Soldiers scatter, diving for cover, their faces frozen in panic. Nearby, the Irish Brigade, trimmed in green, charges through the smoke with fury and pride, driven by legacy and loyalty to a nation still trying to define itself. Each step they take forward through the gunpowder fog is an act of unmatched bravery, but behind the front lines, another battle rages. In a blood-soaked tent, women nurses tend to the mangled and dying. Their hands are stained with the cost of the war, their faces carved with compassion and exhaustion. Some whisper prayers, others fight back tears as they bind wounds they know won't heal. Gettysburg wasn't just a battle. It was a nation on the edge of collapse, a scream into the void of its own identity. And this was only the beginning. The second day of Gettysburg dawned with fire in the sky and uncertainty in every heart. As artillery thundered across the rolling Pennsylvania fields, Union Commander General George Meade stood firm, surrounded by anxious aides and clashing reports. He raised his hand and pointed across the battlefield. Every movement of his troops had to be precise. One wrong decision could mean the fall of the Union. Meade's voice cut through the smoke as orders flew like bullets, directing men into position for what would become one of the most defining struggles in American history. Above the scorched earth, two flags, Union blue and Confederate gray, seemed frozen in midair, locked in a symbolic struggle that mirrored the deadly reality on the ground. Below them, the fields were ablaze. This was no longer a battle between armies. It was an existential war between two futures. And into that inferno stepped a boy, a drummer, with a face too young for war, yet hardened by what he'd already seen. He marched steadily, the rhythm of his drum competing with the booming cannons behind him, his courage louder than fear. Just miles from the front, a civilian family cowered in the basement of their farmhouse. Dust drifted from the ceiling with every explosion. A child clutched his mother as the sounds of death grew nearer. Above them, lives were being lost by the minute, but in that cellar, all they could do was pray the war wouldn't find them. War had come to their doorstep uninvited and without mercy. On a ridge not far away, General Robert E. Lee surveyed the fog-covered hills. His expression was not one of triumph, but of weight. This was not the victory he had hoped for. Each charge ordered meant more blood spilled, more men lost. Around him, the mist whispered with the cries of the wounded and the dead. Every step forward came at an unbearable cost. An ultra-detailed map lay spread across a table in the Union camp, smeared with mud, blood, and frantic ink. Markings showed shifting lines, desperate strategies, and shattered hopes. War wasn't just chaos, it was cold calculations made in the middle of madness. Outside, the battlefield was now a graveyard for horses and iron. Dead animals lay tangled in reins. Beside shattered cannons and splintered wheels, reminders that everything, even steel and flesh, was breakable. And there, in the stillness between volleys, lay two soldiers. One wore Union blue, the other Confederate gray. They were side by side in death, rifles fallen from their hands. No hatred in their final expressions, just silence. Two lives from different worlds ended the same way. Under the same sky, for reasons they may never have fully understood. Suddenly, a storm of hooves shattered the quiet. Union cavalry burst through the smoke with sabers gleaming, horses rearing, men screaming commands into the void. It was a moment of pure chaos and fury, an explosion of desperation and valor. As night fell, the battlefield dimmed, but the war didn't end. Around a flickering campfire, Union soldiers sat hunched, reading letters from home. Shadows danced on their faces. Some cried, others stared silently into the flames. In that moment, every man there wondered if he would live to write back. As the final day of Gettysburg unfolded, Cemetery Hill became a storm of fire and smoke. From above, it looked like the earth itself was bleeding light. Artillery flashed like lightning in the darkness, thunderous blasts shaking the ground beneath. Exhausted feet. Soldiers scrambled through thick smoke, eyes wide with fear but hands steady on their rifles. The hill had to hold if it fell, so would the Union, down below. The faces of young soldiers told a story no history book could capture. Some were barely out of boyhood, their cheeks still soft, their eyes hollowed by sleepless nights and horrors witnessed. Dirt clung to their skin, sweat to their brows, but they stood their ground with a determination far beyond their years. They weren't fighting for glory anymore, they were fighting for survival, for their brothers beside them, for something greater than themselves. On Little Round Top, the fate of the Union hung by a thread. The 20th Maine, led by the indomitable Colonel Joshua Chamberlain, made their legendary last stand. Surrounded and out of ammunition, they fixed bayonets and charged. It was desperation turned into heroism, a single moment that pushed back the Confederate tide and altered the course of the war. Their courage echoed louder than any cannon. When the guns finally fell silent, Gettysburg was a ghost town of grief. In the fog of the morning after, rows of makeshift graves stretched across the scorched ground. Flags lay in tatters beside broken muskets, a landscape of silence and loss. The air was heavy with the souls that never left. Families came searching for names they would never find. Among the living stood black Union soldiers, heroes too long overlooked. They stood proud against the smoke-filled horizon, their faces defiant, their service undeniable. They fought not just for a country divided, but for a freedom still out of reach. Their sacrifice helped bend the arc of history toward justice. In a quiet corner of the field, a wounded soldier fell into the arms of his family. Tears flowed freely, mixing with blood and dirt. No words were needed. Just the miracle of reunion in a place where so many were lost forever. It was a reminder that war isn't just fought on the battlefield, it's carried home in hearts and scars. Months later, in the shadow of that devastation, President Abraham Lincoln arrived. His voice was calm, his message eternal. The Gettysburg address was not long, but it pierced the silence like a bell. He spoke not of vengeance, but of purpose, that these dead shall not have died in vain, and that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom. Some say the battlefield is still haunted, that if you walk it under a moonlit sky, you can see the ghostly silhouettes of the fallen standing vigil where they died. The past refuses to stay buried. In one final moment, a photographer captured the aftermath through the lens of a heavy field camera, black and white memories etched into forever. And as the dust settled over Gettysburg, a tattered American flag slowly rose once more. Above it, an eagle soared. Bruised but unbroken, a nation dared to hope again.